very good afternoon to all our listeners and welcome to the Fulcrum podcast. Fulcrum is ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute's commentary and analysis website, and we run a few podcasts a year, probably about a dozen. My name is Julia Lau. I'm Senior Fellow and Co-Coordinator of the Indonesia Studies Program, and I'm also one of the editors at Fulcrum. With me today is my guest, Dr. Udan Fernando, and I'm very pleased to meet him in Timor. We'll talk maybe a little bit about that if we have time. But he's here because he has done a documentary on Timor and specifically migration to Timor for workers. But first, I'll read out his bio and let the listeners know more about him. Dr. Udan Fernando obtained his PhD from the University of Amsterdam in International Development Cooperation. He has focused on development cooperation and aid policy and worked in various places, including Sri Lanka, Europe, East and West Africa, and Southeast Asia. Quite recently, he was Executive Director of the Center for Poverty Analysis, or CEPA, CEPA, a Sri Lankan think tank from 2012 to 2020. Happily, Udan is currently based in Singapore. He works as a consultant with the Association for Asian Studies, or AAS. At AAS, Udan works with the project Developing the Humanities and Social Sciences and supporting underrepresented scholars of Asia in Cambodia, Thailand, India, Pakistan, and Timor-Leste. And very interestingly, so he completed a diploma in cinematography in 1984 from a place called OCIC Colombo, which I only learned today stands for the International Catholic Organization for Cinema and Audiovisual, but in Latin, so hence OCIC. Learn something new every day. From 2019, Udan therefore launched a parallel career of making documentary films, and he has several films under his belt, at least 5, if not 6, right? And there's a project coming on. So without further ado, I'll launch into some of the questions, but maybe to begin with, in addition to the bio, I would like Udan, who is a very unusual guest because he's an academic, but also a documentary filmmaker, and who has screened his films in Europe, in different countries. How do you, and this is a question that wasn't on the list, but how do you combine this part academic, part filmmaker portion of your career?
Thank you, Julia. First, thank you and also your institute for inviting me. It's a pleasure and also an honor to be part of your podcast series. The question, yeah, I think it's kind of, these two activities have their own element of fun and also stress. Right. But what happens is that when I'm quite, kind of bored or burdened with one aspect of, side of, the work that you mentioned, say the academic side, then I can always, find a kind of a getaway, find a, I can think about the same thing, but more on a kind of as a film project or a cinematic project, because, and then when I'm also, and it also helps the other way. It's not a one-way traffic. It also helps to kind of, to get kind of, like cross-fertilization of ideas and so on. When I'm thinking of a film project, the research, the academic aspect certainly helps. It's if not, I need to kind of employ a team of researchers to do the required research work. But because of the combination of skills that I've acquired, I could, it's complementary actually.
Yeah, that, a bit like left brain and right brain working together, right? So if you will, maybe for our listeners, probably, I don't know that any of them might have seen the film yet, and I, sort of full disclosure, I haven't actually managed to see it, but we're hoping to have a screening of it at some point, even if it's informal at ISEAS. What's the film about? What's it called? And how long did it take for you to sort of conceive of it and finish it?
The title of the film is Not So Greener Pastures. So the Greener Pastures is the bigger title, and then the Not So comes as a kind of a, like a tiny kind of, graphically, but if you write in text, it's Not So Greener Pastures. But I give prominent to Greener Pastures and then have Not So as something, it's like how a teacher has put, not so the answer. That's how that's how my designer conceived
Right.
the idea, which also goes with the content of the film. Well, the kind of the idea of it was the story. I was excited about or kind of curious about the country for quite some time. I'll tell you the details. And the most kind of immediate reason was that during the time, the long period I was living in the Netherlands, I had a close friend called Lasanta Navaratna, who works for a international organization there. And he was telling me about his own story. And his story was, his kind of, the migrant story started from Timor-Leste. So that's how, the initial seed of, of the idea, was found. And then later on, with my current, workplace Association for Asian Studies, AAS, sent me to Timor-Leste for a professional, assignment. I was able to make use of, I had an extended stay that was in 2023, and so I could do the production part of the film, but the post production was done later on in Singapore and Colombo.
Right. Can you briefly summarize the plot of if there's a plot, I guess, the narrative of the film?
Well, it's about four people, four men who are originating from Sri Lanka, and they come from literally four corners of Sri Lanka: north, south, east, and west. Which means that they also represent a certain level of diversity in terms of language, in terms of ethnicity, and so on. And these four people, end up in Timor-Leste as early as 2002, 2005, which you would understand. This was the transitional kind of period of Timor-Leste from gaining. They are kind of a brand new kind of new nation, and things were were still in a state of flux. So during this state of flux, these four Sri Lankan men were young at that time. They I don't want to say they came. Their migrant or migration trajectories were such that they ended up in Timor-Leste.
Would you say they were pushed or pulled?
So this is the story that I'm trying to unravel. It's certainly not a kind of an informed kind of a decision or a choice in terms of where they want to go. And the kind of there's also kind of a range of intentions. From I want to go somewhere, anywhere, doesn't matter. It's going abroad, overseas. From that to a greener pasture like Australia, particularly. Because Timor between Colombo and Australia lies, Indonesia. So and some have ended up in Timor-Leste, as a result of various, of trafficking, migration related kind of, complications, and they were unable to reach their kind of desired destination, and they get kind of stranded or kind of, and some even didn't know that there was a country called Timor-Leste. And it's only after coming and staying there for a few months they realize that, oh, there's a country like this. And
so just to clarify for the listeners, because they may not
be aware, and I'm assuming many people have never been even to Timor, right? They understand Indonesia, they've probably been to Bali if they're Singaporeans or Australians, but they may not have any awareness or even of East Timor when it was part of Indonesia, and then broke away and became an independent country in 2002, like you mentioned. Were these 4 men in your story trafficked or brought into Timor via ship, via plane, some other way? How were they transported first? And of the 4 men, how many didn't know where they were going?
I think the one person clearly knew that he's coming to Timor-Leste, and in his case, it was a kind of a job, and also kind of like he was like a kind of a partner of a business that was set up by a Sri Lankan who was living in Japan together with another Japanese investor. So they wanted to start a vehicle importing agency in Dili, that's the capital of Timor-Leste, and so they were the Sri Lankan businessman and also the Japanese investor. They were exporting vehicles from Japan, the used vehicle, what are called reconditioned, to Timor-Leste, and they wanted a guy to run the sales and also the after sales service in Dili. So they picked up this guy from Sri Lanka, who had worked in a similar kind of setup, who's very competent in automobile repairs also. So he comes, that was kind of, it was more like a, informed decision.
And he's a trained worker. He has skills at least, if not
well,
qualifications.
it's I think not formally trained,
Okay.
and that's not his fault, but a job of this nature in Sri Lanka is not very well kind of backed by formal training, formal vocational training.
I suspect that's the case across Indonesia and probably
right.
many parts of Malaysia as well, and probably even in Singapore actually.
Well, but
At least one or two generations ago.
Yeah, but this generation of technicians have acquired. They have excellent hands-on experience, and so this was more like the cars, the automobiles that came before they were like digitized or kind of used a lot of electronic kind of technology.
Right.
It's more like manual gears and so on.
Old cars.
Old cars. Yeah. So they were very good at in and out of the engine and the other accessories of the car.
So this one person is informed, and the other 3, I assume, by the way you say it,
other person has come to with some of their stories. I didn't want to push them too much because there were certain kind of sensitivities involved, which involves security and so on. And there's one person who has come to Indonesia, and he claims that he came for business, and then as part of this kind of business work, he and some of his friends felt that Delhi is also a good place for business, and therefore they came for business. But observing what they have been doing, it's a very kind of small scale of business, running a kind of an eatery, running a grocery shop, something like that. So it's not the business that one would think as like large scale. And the other 2 person, another person who comes from the IT background, that was also kind of, I would say informed decision. It was more kind of a job that was offered to him. But the other person, he was hoping to go elsewhere, and then that could, and initially actually he was in Jakarta, and then the sub-agent, according to his story, after some time, has sent him and also my friend in the Netherlands I was referring to, to a place that they never knew, and that was Kupan, which was the airport in the west side of Timor, which is now under the Indonesian rule, Kupan. And from there, they have taken, some motorcycles and have come to Delhi. So from 2005 till now, it's ranging from 20 to 25 years. These people have been living, in Timor-Leste.
And they're all still living there today.
The 4 people who are featuring, in the film are living there.
Okay. I'll jump to the second question. What surprised you the most when you interviewed the 4 men?
Sorry?
What surprised you the most when you interviewed the 4 men?
Can you
Meaning, and you can interpret surprise
right.
any way you want, but was there
Yeah.
something in their stories, or was there something they all said that basically just took you by surprise, that you weren't expecting them to say something like that, or did you know, even when they said something slightly surprising, you were like, yeah, I kind of knew that?
Well, not in terms of a particular statement.
Okay.
And but their existence, because I also had the opportunity of visiting them a few times, and observing their environment, and talking to other people about the 4 characters. What surprised me was how settled they were in a country which is very not much different from the vegetation, because it's Sri Lankan climate, and also some parts of Timor-Leste climate seems to be there seems to be some kind of parallels, and therefore the vegetation, the kind of trees that you get are almost the same, so in that sense there's some kind of, it's not a kind of an alien, strange kind of environment, but socially and politically, it's a very different, and also linguistically, language wise, it's completely different. They don't speak English, they speak either Bahasa Indonesia or Portuguese, or their own language, which is a kind of a variation, and they are they're fluent in the local languages, and also not so much in Portuguese, but Bahasa Indonesia, and also the local dialects. They're very very. So it's they're really, to use certain kind of terms, that are like assimilation, integration, unbelievable degree of assimilation, unbelievable level of integration. Actually, they are part and parcel of that society.
When you say that, do you mean that any of the men have married local women, or have they set up families? Like when you say, because you use the word settled, that's a pretty strong term.
I think it happens in both ways. Like let me see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, three out of 4 have married women from Timor.
But they remain migrants, or have they taken on, or the kids, have they taken on, if they have them, citizenship?
Well, these kind of technical matters are not very clear, and for their day-to-day kind of existence, that really doesn't matter.
Okay.
Whether they are a citizen or not, whether they have a permanent resident, I mean, those administrative kind of, the usual migration visa, regime is not that sophisticated, and also it's not, even if it is, there, the degree of enforcement is not that strict and prevalent. So they don't have a problem. Some of them have all Sri Lankan passports, and they don't, and they also don't travel to Sri Lanka, so they don't
need them.
they don't worry too much.
Yeah.
But their children are going to schools there, and and the person who's not married to a person in East Timor or Timor-Leste, is married, but his wife and children live, in Sri Lanka. So 3 out of 4, and then they have the families, extended family. I mean, the Timorese culture is very much, family oriented.
Yes.
And also has certain kind of, tribal, features. And they are very much part and parcel of all those rituals, tradition, customs, and having a very close kind of, bond with the, they have actually dissolved themselves to the Timorese society, actually.
That's a very interesting word, dissolved. So back to the point about, I think at least, and I think you'll probably agree that many Southeast Asians haven't visited Timor-Leste, and until last July, I had never been there. And that's where we met at the conference.
That's right.
What would you want your film, or what do you think your film says about Timor, to the world or to the region? What do you want people to know when they watch this film?
Well, it was, although I've heard the stories, more from a kind of a political side. I was following some of the the developments from late 90s, when there were some missions, UN missions, and some of my friends happened to be part of those missions, so I was privy to some of the things that were happening. And because for Sri Lanka, Timor-Leste wasn't a huge kind of source of interest, but due to my personal kind of just because I had some friends who were working in Timor, I had the prior knowledge, and so, but seeing it, it happened, when I was visiting last year. And the first thing is that it's a very, very beautiful country.
Yes.
And I'm sure, you enjoyed, even the capital city, Delhi, is a beautiful kind of.
We highly recommend the snorkeling.
That's right. So it has I think it has not tapped the potential of tourism, to the extent that they could, because of certain kind of logistical reasons, lack of inadequate, logistical kind of, facilities, including frequent flights, and also the flight fares are quite
steep.
Yeah, steep. So there's no kind of so there should be certain kind of policy.
I think even since last year, it's improved. I know that Air Timor now has added some flights, and I think prices are a little bit lower than they were. The eye-watering price of $900 round trip.
That's right. Yeah, I feel the same.
On Bhutan Air / Druk Air.
Took the same flight. Yeah,
same. At 3 a.m.
Yeah,
from Changi. I actually, on that point, the one that you just made, what do you think will happen when Timor joins ASEAN? Do you think, so one of the sort of big questions a lot of us, including at ISEAS, are thinking about is Timor ready for ASEAN? And also, is ASEAN ready for Timor? In whatever way you choose to answer, what do you think, or can you imagine what entering ASEAN, would it be good or bad? Are the people worried? Are any of the 4 men mentioning that at all in the film?
Julia, allow me to complete the answer of your first question.
Sure.
What I want to portray, in addition to the stories of these 4 men, is the kind of one is the natural beauty, of the country, and also the kind of the history and the diversity of Timor-Leste, which is not as beautiful as the nature. You know, they have a very long history of colonialism, invasions, struggles, armed struggle, then problems of language. Certain generations use Portuguese, some Bahasa Indonesia, some and a lot of complications. So it's interesting to kind of for the rest of the world to know how this kind of I can't say emerging nation, it's they kind of became a nation in 2002, but it's one of the kind of the new kind of nations, countries. So kind of to learn something from their experience. That's the backdrop of the film. In addition to the 4 specific stories of the 4 characters. Coming to your question on ASEAN, I think it's from 2002. Here, I would also like to bring in, since we have this discussion in Singapore, I would also like to kind of bring in the Singaporean kind of role also, or the factor. During the years of transition, I have learned that Singapore has been very supportive towards the transition, and provided a lot of support, even in terms of personnel, and sent a contingent of about.
When you say transition, can I just clarify? Do you mean post Suharto, then Habibie transition to independence, or do you mean now transition as an accession process to ASEAN, being an
no
observer member, then a full-fledged ASEAN member, which hasn't happened yet?
The transition I referred to here is from the UN control,
okay,
to the independent.
Right.
So it's the referendum process, and then kind of helping the country to set up the administrative kind of structures, and so on. And here, particularly, I have heard from Timorese colleagues that Singaporean government has helped the emerging Timorese government in terms of setting up the police service,
Right.
or the police department in Timor-Leste. So that has been one of Singapore's specific kind of contribution. They have sent a huge number of experts, personnel, and so on. And one kind of prominent part of the story, not the automobile story, but other businesses. The IT business that some of these people were kind of part of is set up by a Singaporean businessman.
There are, I think, about 70 Singaporeans in Timor as of last year. There was a report run in the Straits Times about all these Singaporeans who were there doing different things. So
even in as early as 2002, that been when the country.
Oh, even in 99, yeah. I know someone who was there on the ground during.
Yeah, and the infrastructure has been pretty basic.
Yes.
But still, and the Chinese investments have not come, in a big way by by that time. So so the Singaporean factor, is very much emerging in the film. But then coming back to the ASEAN, so from 2002, itself, there had been interest on the part of the Timorese government to be part of ASEAN bloc. And because ASEAN has also been engaged in election monitoring and so on. So there were kind of, a lot of exchanges at that time. I think the kind of the formal request, has come, by 2015, 17, that during that time. And uh, countries like Indonesia, Cambodia, the Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia has been supportive of that move, but the records, highlight that Singapore has been very cautious about, of the membership, and therefore, recommended the ASEAN, the what are called the community pillars. They have three community pillars. Um, the political and security pillar, the economic pillar, and also the social and cultural pillar. And there are certain criteria to be kind of a gap analysis to be made. So and some of the concerns, being one is it's a small country.
Yeah, it's tiny. It's,
It's tiny.
1 million, 1.2 million.
1.2 million
like that,
population.
Yeah.
And then in 2015, the GDP has been $1.5 billion US dollars, which is smaller than the smallest economy ASEAN had at that time, which was Laos. Laos GDP in 2015, around that time was 2 billion. So, in terms of the economic pillar of ASEAN community, it was a concern. But there had also been more kind of technical, legalistic kind of concerns, when especially the check, the kind of the compliance bilaterally, whether there are certain kind of constraints, gaps in terms of Timor-Leste and another ASEAN country. And so there have been certain kind of pending issues that need to be kind of, cleared. So the process has been kind of, prolonged for a long time until 2022, when Timor was given the observer status, pending, the full-fledged kind of membership. The complications are, I think it's the economic kind of, the ASEAN has a particular emphasis on economic, progress, whether the inclusion of Timor-Leste would kind of dilute or sort of slow down the momentum or the kind of the collective or the common kind of pace of, or the average pace of economic advancement.
Yeah, I'm not sure they calculate it like an average, but I know,
I mean,
take it as it, yes,
yeah,
fair enough. But I don't know that is the only reason.
No,
so I think there's a sheer capacity question.
Yeah, it's a capacity. So that's kind of, and then the kind of they also go into various kind of
and maybe we'll skip over all these technical details about ASEAN. That's not quite what I meant by the question. How do you think Timor itself will be affected by it? Because as far as I know, I think sentiment on the ground is generally okay. Like, yeah, we welcome it, but I think the part that we haven't mentioned is, going into ASEAN when it finally does, Timor will then get visa-free entry from every other ASEAN country, and that will do nothing but boost tourism, for instance.
Yeah,
we talked about. But I think the question now is, you don't have an airport big enough to handle all these tourists. You barely have an airport big enough to handle ASEAN officials coming from meetings. So there's a few steps that Timor has to go through, whether or not we're on Timor's side. I think that's the hesitation that you're talking about.
That's right.
This gap that, but and maybe it's a question we can't answer yet, as to how going into ASEAN will eventually affect Timor. But from what you know about Timor and from your interactions with the people living there, do you think people are generally positive or negative about it? Or
I think it's the Timorese society. My kind of I don't want to claim that I have a profound knowledge, but
No,
my limited
what you know.
knowledge, is that it kind of I would say it has multiple kind of realities.
Mm.
So, there's also kind of a quite an advanced, progressive kind of, section of society,
Yes.
mostly daily-based business and so on, educated and so on. But then we also have very disconnected, remote,
Mm.
rural, areas.
Mhm.
So it's very hard to kind of, come up with pan kind of Timorese, view on this. But certainly the elite,
Yeah.
is very very open and keen,
Yeah.
and they're also part of certain uh, you know blocks, like I can't exactly remember the name, but there's also a kind of a
Oh, that's
ex-Portuguese,
yeah, that's right. The Lusophone countries.
yeah,
Yeah, I
you
forget
know,
what it is in
so they are
Portuguese.
part and
Right.
parcel of that.
Right.
So, being part of that and also the Portuguese speaking,
Yeah.
they're also slightly different from, from a typical kind of, ex-colony.
Sure.
So they also have certain connections with
Brazil,
Brazil,
Portugal.
Portugal, and also, because of their oil, and gas,
Right.
resources with Australia. So they're not kind of although small in size, in terms of the country, the in geography and also population.
Mhm.
They have quite a relatively they have a good kind of interaction with the global kind of factor. And therefore, it also kind of poses another challenge of geopolitics.
Right.
But I think on the part of Timor, they're very very keen to expand investments. It's mostly kind of to boost, give so the being part of ASEAN
Mm.
would be a huge boost for their economy,
Yeah.
to open, because right now they are very much 80% dependent on oil and gas, but there are concerns about the longevity of this kind of of this income or revenue, and therefore to diversify the sources of revenue for the economy, being part of regional bloc like ASEAN would certainly, I think, is welcomed by the business elite and also the political elite of Timor-Leste.
Yeah, I remember at last year's Timor-Leste Studies Association conference, the sort of joke, but not quite a joke, was it's probably the last Southeast Asian country where there's no online shopping. There's
Right.
no Amazon, nobody's gonna deliver stuff to you, and you can't order anything online. So there was an Australian guy who was joking, yeah, when I go back to Australia, people ask me to bring stuff over to
Right.
deliver for them. Final question, and this is sort of a back to your personal projects. What are you currently working on, and whether it's a film or not? What will be your next project?
Well, these days, I'm taking a little break,
Mhm.
from that part of, the work,
Okay.
and mostly my, films, are also like emerging from the work that I do, from my travels and so on. So I don't plan like long-term kind of projects, and I mean, the process becomes long term once they kind of pop up, but mostly from my travels, and that happens mostly with my professional travels to Asia, and also sometimes Europe and the US.
Mhm.
uh, when I meet people, when I kind of come across certain situations, that these are the kind of, the turning points that kind of, paved the way for me to think about, a new project. So right now, there isn't a kind of I mean, there are a couple of kind of, small projects in my mind, but they're not that active.
Okay,
Yeah.
they're latent.
They're latent, yeah.
Just like Timor. Timor has a lot of latent
That's right.
potential.
It also takes a bit of time for these kind of, creative
Right.
ideas to germinate.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I hope someday you'll come back to ISEAS and maybe screen your film, whether it's to an internal audience here or I actually hope someday to have a real film screening. Apparently, we used to have them a long time ago, like a lunchtime screening. I'm sure I can tempt people if I offer pizza. So we'll see what happens. But thank you very much for today, and thank you for answering my questions. And I hope to see your film soon, actually.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to have had this conversation with you.
Thank you.